Now that I'm done putting my Pikmin in this letter formation, I think I'll talk about how much I enjoy this game after an appropriate zoom out. What the hell? Who put these letters here? Okay, so Pikmin 1 was a game I enjoyed, but as a kid, I was somewhat impoverished. We didn't get to own too many games, so it was more often that my father, who worked at a Blockbuster, would rent games for us. If you don't know what a Blockbuster is, I'm not explaining. This is how I got a lot of my gaming experience outside of gifts, and in 2005 I asked for and received Pikmin 2 and Shadow the Hedgehog for Christmas. I heard Shadow the Hedgehog say damn when he died and got scared if my parents heard because I was 6 and that was the 15th highest rated bad word I wasn't allowed to say or acknowledge. And number 14 is hell, and it's a bit too late now, I know all the bad words, so instead I played Pikmin 2. Pikmin 2 had actually come out in 2004, but I was stupid and didn't know gaming journalism or media, so all my knowledge was simply what I can see at any given point of time. Pikmin 2 apparently didn't sell too well, but it definitely sucks that more people didn't play this game like the first game. They added a lot of new mechanics on top of the originals and cleaned up some of the problems that the first game had with AI. The game starts off with a recap of the first game and then shows us the moment Olimar gets home on his planet. He arrives and is immediately told the company is in debt. Apparently this dumbass right here named Louie met a ravenous space rabbit that ate all his golden Pikmin carrots, and they have no way to repay. But apparently this bottle cap right here that Olimar brought home is worth quite a bit of money, and now you're going to go back to the planet with Louie to get more treasure. That's right, Pikmin 2 is about the failures of space capitalism. And once you get back, you crash land as per established Pikmin tradition. So of course you have to meet back up with them, and you meet the Pikmin again, and look at that! They're still murdering since you've been gone, and I'm quite proud of these dudes. And they remember who you are, isn't that just cute? You won't be jumped and beaten to death on sight. I honestly think it's quite interesting to see Pikmin function without you around. They obviously aren't as competent or strong without a leader like Olimar, but they have shown that they are able to survive on their own despite seeming so frail in the last game. And this is where the most interesting part of Pikmin 2's gameplay comes in. You have 2 separate captains that you can control. This was mind-boggling to me as a kid, like I can be 2 whole people? I couldn't do this unless... Holy shit. So with 2 captains, this means you can tackle 2 different tasks, not at the same time mind you, but this drastically makes your day a lot faster if you know what to do. You can work on a gate over here while you also deal with an enemy over here. Or have one way with the onions to get the Pikmin when they come back to base, and then swap places with the other captain. There's so many possibilities for time optimization, and I really love it. It's fantastic. Later in the game, you can even get some treasures that work also as upgrades to your suit, such as the knapsack. It lets Pikmin pick you up and bring you back to the main base, while you can use the other captain to do whatever the hell you want. This is a huge improvement on the first game's RTS concepts, while still being entirely its own type of game. It really is just expanding upon the first game, and that's the way I usually like my sequels. More of the same, but that same doesn't really replace the first game. They're both their own experiences. Pikmin 2, however, did remove the day limit, but I think it's for good reason. This game is huge. The areas are a lot bigger with far more to do in them. It doesn't really serve the narrative either because you purposely went here this time, as well as your ship not being absolutely destroyed. So after getting Louie and the Pikmin, you're introduced to the treasure, which is almost all literally things from real life like Nintendo toys and brand deals. I honestly love this so much. It's so out of place yet also makes complete sense. To this day I cannot see Carmex in person without thinking about this game because it's just the first time I ever even seen Carmex. It's so funny seeing real-world branded items in my Nintendo game as long-lost relics to an alien civilization. You're honestly telling me that the only thing left behind by humanity was a goddamn robotic operating buddy? I'm not complaining, I'm just asking. So after coming back the next day with Louie, you're introduced to the next feature, caves. The caves are kind of contentious, you either like them or you don't, but they are a big part of the game and you'll be spending a lot of time in these caves. You go into these holes and then you get a weird genre change, and it's like this sort of dungeon crawler. At least that's the closest thing I can think of. There's quite a few holes in this game, and most of them are very different in appearance and varied in content and enemies. This is where Pikmin 2 gets most of its length. In these caves, you'll have to find all the treasure you can, while also taking on a barrage of enemies and avoid hazards. But you also can't get more Pikmin, so it ends up being this war of attrition sort of thing. Especially in the late game where some of these caves can go on past the 10 floor mark. Every Pikmin counts here. And that's what I really like about Pikmin 2, it's hard as hell. I never beat this game as a kid, and I got all the way to the final boss and just never did it. I had to come back and beat this game when I was 12 years old. But its difficulty is something a lot of people don't enjoy for good reasons and some kind of bad ones. When it comes to difficulty, I like to separate this game into 2 segments, above ground and below ground. So above ground is pretty tame. It's just like Pikmin 1, you can get jumped in a dark alleyway and have your troops robbed from you, but everything is mostly fair up here. You see an enemy, assess the situation, and play accordingly. There's some rough parts, but they're technically when reaching the end of the game, so it's expected to see a ramp up in difficulty. But the caves? There's no rules down here, buddy. There's no salvation and treasure down here. It's the Hole of Heroes. You're gonna die. When you're down here, expect to restart this game a lot. because you're going to get absolutely fucked down here. Early game caves are not randomized, so if you play the game once or reset a floor, it's mostly going to stay the same for the most part. Maybe a few enemies switch places. But later game, these areas are almost entirely randomized. It's rare to see a game play out the same like anyone else's. They really hit you with some fucked up shit down here, like, it's sometimes outright unfair. It's really not that uncommon to start doing a task and suddenly have an active explosive land next to you and you're 100 Pikmin, and you instantly shit yourself.
No, 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 no!
Dame da ne, dame yo, dame nano yo. Anta ga suki de, suki sugite, dore dake 強いお酒でも歪めない思い出がバカみたい
No! God damn it!
There's at least one big positive when you're down here though. When you go down here, time stops above ground. So if you go into a cave in the morning, well, you can at least expect when you exit the cave, you'll still have the whole day to do some work. Hell, maybe go into another cave if you're fucked up. This stuff really weeds out the people who like this game and the people who dislike this game. These holes can go on for pretty long, and some people don't like the way they look or play, and I can get that somewhat. But I think overall as a package, Pikmin 2 is just a far superior game to the first game. While more doesn't really mean better, in the case of Pikmin 2, I think the more shown here is really great. Pikmin 1 was extremely short, so the extra meat on Pikmin 2's bones really appeals to me. Pikmin 2, like Pikmin 1, has 3 main areas until you repay your debt, to which you unlock the 4th and final area. Valley of Repose is the first map, which is entirely new. Personally, this is my least favorite area in the game. I feel it's the one that, besides the caves, you can get done in the fastest amount of time. It's not really smaller than the other areas, but it just feels that way, being the first area that only opens up completely when unlocking the blue Pikmin. But I still think this area is very interesting because it's just a crosswalk. This is the first actual instance of Pikmin showing that this Earth was once inhabited by humans, and this detail is pretty hard to put together when you're on the ground, but when you get a view from the sky, it's a lot clearer. It's not something you typically look for or think about, but the detail is there that humans once lived here. This planet once had very intelligent life, and I think that's really cool. It's obvious that this is Earth, but it's also obvious that humans haven't been here for a while, or at least they haven't interacted with these areas that we land. But considering the things we see in the series, it's a good assumption that humans are extinct. But on to the next area, the Awakening Woods. I think it's great. Everything here is so colorful and pretty, and it takes place in a garden, and guess what? This is just the Forest of Hope from Pikmin 1. If you look at the map, they have the same layout. It's just that things have changed a lot since you've last been here, and I absolutely love it. The Awakening Wood was my favorite area growing up. It's more of a garden now with this pot here and more fauna, but once again, it seems humans were here at some point, but nature is just taking its course. Now this is where the game gets rough, the perplexing pool. Once again, this is just another Pikmin 1 area repurposed and changed up a bit. There's now for some reason a shower here, and frankly I'm sure most people who watch my videos don't know what that is, but I'm here to tell you it will hurt you and you should avoid it at all costs. The perplexing pool is where boys become boys, but they have PTSD now. This area isn't the hardest, but it's definitely the hardest out of the first 3. The enemies here are relentless, there's always something around the corner, but the real winner of this area is its music, which I'm not going to go into right now because it's a rabbit hole and I'm going to leave that for later in the video. This area has the best music in the game if you ask me, I absolutely love it. Now, if you're a Pikmin 2 aficionado, don't make fun of me. I only found out on my most recent playthrough getting the footage for this video that Wistful Wild is actually Impact Site from Pikmin 1. I don't know why it took me literally like over a decade to put this together, but it did. It really satisfied me figuring this out because something always felt off about this level growing up, familiar yet not the same at the same time, and well, I finally got my answer.
Fuck is even the point of this? It's literally just the thing from Pikmin 1, but reversed. Wait a minute. This is Pikmin 1! Oh! Oh, it is! Oh my god! I never fucking know! I never noticed! I just saw these patterns on the floor and I was like, man, like, why are these here? Like, the Pikmin don't land over here. Oh, I feel stupid. It's been 15 years and I didn't even fucking know.
The Wistful Wild is the shortest area in the game. There's not really much to say here except that it's a hostile wasteland that's out to fucking kill you, and it's miserable. I love it. This area's difficulty really makes it feel like the final area of the game with how hostile it is. You only unlock it after you beat the first part of the game, in which you repay the debt and accidentally leave Louis behind like the animal he is. Now that Louis is gone, The president's your best friend. The rest of the game is just you finding what hole Louis is in and to get to the bottom of it. You find out that he's alive, but just unconscious, just sitting there and oh my god, it's horrifying. This boss is extremely hard and also not hard at all at the same time. You have to A, get through 14 floors with enough Pikmin, 2, fight a spider that has every single element in the game, including electricity, which will instantly kill any Pikmin that isn't yellow, and D, keep enough Pikmin alive so that you can get all the treasure out, and never mind, yellow Pikmin can survive all these other things with a whistle blow, so just use yellows. Yeah, so this is the final boss, and if you don't use this exploit, it's really hard, and if you don't manage your Pikmin properly, say goodbye to all of them. This boss isn't exactly easy when you exploit this weakness either though, so you just don't have a very high chance of losing. Losing the other Pikmin doesn't really matter because it's just the end of the game, so as long as you can get Louis, which is pretty easy, you can leave afterwards and say you beat the game. You can just come back for the treasure you might have left behind if a lot died later if you want to go for 100% completion. This game was so much longer than the first game. The first game you can beat in 3 to 6 hours. This game is roughly double the longest playthrough of Pikmin 1, give or take. Pikmin 1 only took me about 4 hours, which was a really fun 4 hours, but something if I even tried, I can finish faster. As for Pikmin 2, it took me maybe 13 to 14 hours, and I'm an experienced Pikmin player. Your time may vary a lot from that if you're new, and you'll probably be looking at far more than that. I was going for 100% completion too, so I was doing good time, as this is just the average for simply beating the game. And that's Pikmin 2, so now I want to talk about, well, whatever the hell I want. First off, the Pikmin themselves. The main three mostly stay the same besides Yellow Pikmin, who got pretty much completely changed besides their throw height. So they can no longer pick up bomb rocks in this game because, well, there are no bomb rocks to pick up in this game besides the ones that blow up and kill you. But to make up for that, Yellow Pikmin are now the Electric Pikmin. They deal with all things electric in this game, and I think that's a very good change to give them more identity. It fits with the rest of the Pikmin and the color of their skin dictating what elements they can deal with. But the real stars here are the new White and Purple Pikmin. They're completely new to this game. Purple Pikmin are slow and strong, and they can stun enemies when you throw them onto something. And White Pikmin walk very fast and are immune to poison. They also have the ability to see treasure that's hidden underground that you wouldn't be able to see otherwise. I think they're both great additions to Pikmin's gameplay, and I really enjoy them. But there's another Pikmin added to this game. That's right, the Bulbmen. These Pikmin are a parasitic species that have infected a Bulbmin and control them. They're super weird, but I'm going to be honest, I'm cheating. They're my favorite Pikmin type. They can only be found in 3 caves in the game and can be recruited when you kill their mom. Isn't Pikmin 2 just fucking such a great game? I love killing moms. I really hope that these guys come back one day. They're obviously broken because they have the ability of every Pikmin in the game, but purple stun mechanic. But they're only this strong because they are temporary troops because they can't come out of caves. I just think they're neat. And speaking of broken, the balance of this game is something. This game is simultaneously very well balanced and extremely broken at the same time. And most of that responsibility is on the purple Pikmin. These little war criminals have the highest attack in the game, do damage when thrown, and can stun the enemy for a period of time and invalidate most normal enemy fights. And they really help with boss fights too. Now, contrary to what people say, they don't just trivialize this game. They make the game significantly easier than if you were just not to have them and exploit their ability. And on bosses, they can easily take off half their health, but the thing is you can't do this mindlessly, because you can only get purple and white Pikmin in caves, and they don't have an onion. So when one of these Pikmin dies, you really feel it, and I really like that about Pikmin 2. You really feel it when one of your Pikmin dies, especially in caves. So using purples with their huge power comes at the downside that you might fuck up and lose a couple purples, and that really means a lot. But if you're smart, you're not going to run out of any purples anytime soon. But I'd argue that's more on you, the player, being skilled enough to actually make use of the exploit. It's a risk of reward, you know? With all that out of the way, here's my favorite part. The Piklopedia and the creatures themselves. Pikmin 2's creatures, world, and the Piklopedia are 100% why I think Pikmin 2 is the best and most interesting game in the series. Every creature in the game has an extremely detailed description, genus, and explanation on what they can do and their behaviors. From small bugs to the biggest bosses, there is something to learn about these creatures, and I fucking love it. Not only does this give Pikmin's world so much lore, it's also extremely interesting, especially when discussing the most outlandish creatures. Like the Gatling Groint, this thing fires mortar shots at you, so Olimart's notes read, "This beastly predator's aggressive injection of high-speed projectiles make it one of the most fearsome creatures in the ecosystem. Its body seems to comprise of both biological and mechanical components, and represents one of the most evolutionary advanced specimens ever observed. The chamber within its torso gives it a rapid-fire biopellet launch capabilities. What appears to be a tail fin is in fact the base of its counterweight, an ammunition cylinder, so immobilizing the appendage will prevent the groint from attacking. at least in theory. Confirmation of this suspicion remains elusive, as nobody has volunteered to test it. So this tells us a few things. 1, this thing shoots biological pellets at us, it is biological yet has mechanical components, and that is as scary in Olimar's notes as it is in-game. I can be here all day talking about this stuff because, well, there's a lot of enemies and a lot of Olimar's notes, not to mention Louie's notes. But another one I enjoy is the careening didgeridoo. It has balloons on its back, which it flies with and can create bomb rocks somehow. It's implied that it has an unknown origin, and it's believed that it's at least alien to this ecosystem. Volatile dweevils are your average dweevil, but instead of picking up a normal item, they just like to pick up explosives and then fucking kill themselves. But the two I really want to focus on, and explains exactly why I love the Piklopedia and why I love Pikmin 2's world and its enemy design, is the man-at-legs and the water wraith. The water wraith is some sort of interdimensional humanoid being that rides around on Flintstone car rocks, is completely invincible until the final floor, and throughout its cave, the submerged castle, after 5 minutes on any floor, it'll appear and try to run you over and kill them instantly. This fucker is nerve-wracking when he appears, and nothing is known about him. That's what Olimar's notes say. In short, I don't know what the fuck this shit is, but it's fucked up if true. And my favorite Pikmin enemy is, without a doubt, Man-at-Legs. This thing is an unholy abomination of nature. It's a take on the spider enemy we've seen before with Longlegs and the Arachnor family, but instead they just said, what if we gave it a fucking gun? That's right, this fucker has a gun. I fucking love this thing. It's a whole different type of horror not explored in the other games at all. Unlike the rest of its species, this thing doesn't try to crush your Pikmin, it tries to blow them the fuck up. And it's with a laser-sighted energy cannon. This thing is ruthless. These Pikmin are dying deaths of men in the fucking trenches. This isn't Pikmin anymore, this is No Man's Land in World War I.
Look. Your men are dying out there. You're low on troops, and you're the last soldier under my command. It's been nice knowing you, Steve. I'll send my condolences to the Onion.
So, this thing wasn't born this way. It at some point just merges with machinery to become this way. It doesn't have any direct control of the gun. The mechanical part has an automatic targeting system to detect enemies and shoot them on sight. This thing is so powerful that it had no natural enemies, and it has no reason to be this strong because it isn't naturally a violent being, and that the machinery, which appears to have AI, is what attaches itself to the Arachnor. Why did they go through so much trouble for this? And not only that, there's visual details here as well that aren't touched in the notes. This thing has exhaust pipes. It uses some sort of fuel, or at least used it to vent heat, which it clearly emanates a lot of, and for some reason, one of its legs is also mechanical. And for my favorite part, the man-made horror is beyond our comprehension. This thing opens up and its fleshy goo stretches outwards, be it muscle tissue or whatever the fuck that is. This is the man-at-legs insides being opened up to let out a gun, to violently kill you. This shit is insane, and by god do I fucking love it. And you wanna know what? It's finally time to talk about the music, because the boss music in this game is fucking great. So, just like in Pikmin 1, all the music in this game is dynamic, from main areas to the caves to the boss battles. Typically in Pikmin, the music revolves around the player character and what they're doing, but the boss music entirely depends on what the boss is doing as a role reversal. You're in the boss's domain now. This isn't your time now, it's theirs. There's 4 different attack beats to play when the boss is doing an attack, as well as a defense version of the song for when the boss is defending, and then there's the about to attack beat, which typically receives the big attack theme as a warning to get ready for what's about to happen. And the about to attack and the big attack parts of the song are the only parts that are played in the Man-at-Legs fight because he literally only has one attack, and it's a big fucking attack. I also absolutely adore that this song uses war drums for your little army of dudes who are about to be blown to smithereens. All the music in this game is superb, and only builds off of what the first game does and to an insane amount. Most people wouldn't even notice how many different songs there are. For every area in the game there is a main theme, an enemy nearby theme, a battle theme, a working theme, a treasure theme, a near spider warp theme, and then all of those again, but for the sunset version of the song in every area. Now double all of those because there's a version of every one of those for each of the captains. So there is 4 versions of every song for the overworld, and then extend this to the caves and exclude what you wouldn't have in a game like Sunset or Spiderworks. The variety and subtlety in every Pikmin 2 song is honestly unmatched by any game I'm aware of. The Sunset version of these themes are by far my favorites overall though, because they are all kind of music boxy, and I'm pretty sure this game is what made me love music box versions of songs in the first place. Pikmin was a big part of my childhood growing up, so I don't have any doubts it also had an effect on my music taste, especially with how good it is. This game's music has been stuck in my head since I played it for the first time 17 years ago. The Perplexing Pool is such a calming song, and Awakening Wood is just so catchy that I find myself humming them at random times nearly 20 years later. It's just that good. Now with all that said, Is Pikmin 2 better than Pikmin 1? In my opinion, yes. I love Pikmin 2, clearly all my praise can show that, but the thing is that, well, Pikmin 1 is a very consistent game in its quality. Nothing is outright bad or anything like that in Pikmin 1. It's all good with a small flaw here and there, which makes Pikmin 1, while short, it's very hard to find flaws in the product. It's kind of why my video was so short, because Pikmin 1 isn't really long enough to just start picking holes in it, you know? Its gameplay is nothing too crazy, it's not too difficult, it's a new property with little to no identity other than what Olimar, Pikmin, and the enemies show. Nothing is really crazy in Pikmin that made it truly stand out from any other game than its gameplay itself. But that's okay, because Pikmin was never trying to be anything but a new IP that was simple and interesting. As for Pikmin 2, it expands on almost everything Pikmin 1 did in a lot of good ways, and sometimes very questionable ways. While Pikmin 2 has way higher highs, it also has way lower lows than Pikmin 1 could ever reach. This makes me think of Pikmin 2 as a superior game for me, because the parts I love, I really do love, but there's some goddamn bullshit in there.
I'm just gonna restart my GameCube.
But these things that are bullshit, I as a longtime fan can scream and laugh about when it happened. But for someone who is less epic gamer than me, I can see them being frustrating or outright just unfun to deal with. Pikmin 2 is a really good sequel, but it's a sequel I can say is better than the original, but also somehow manages to be worse in a few spots. Not by a large margin, but enough where I can at least understand why people prefer the first game. Pikmin 2 will always be close to my heart, and I really hope that if you haven't played it, go play it. After playing the first game, of course. Both of these games are really good. And it kills me inside knowing that these games will never get a remake or a remaster in any form because Nintendo would have to approach every single one of these brands to renegotiate a deal. Or if a re-release does happen, they will have to remove most, if not all, brands. And it just wouldn't be the same. Well, now that this video's over, I don't need this clone anymore, so, and now that that's dealt with, next on the list is Pikmin 3, where we have 3 captains.
Oh, God damn it.